This lesson, titled Working with Relative and Absolute References, has us in Workbook 03, Creating Formulas and Functions, and we're in Worksheet tab, Absolute. In previous lessons, we talked about creating simple formulas and functions and then copying them to adjacent cells. Up till now, we've only used the concept of relative references. I can demonstrate that very quickly, what a relative reference is. If I wanted the total of our sales times our percentage for the commission, and to put the answer here, in other words, I want 944.40 times 10%, and to get the total commission here, I'll simply click, say equals. That's how we start every formula and function. I click over here to get the sales reference. Then I use times, which is shift and then 8 to get the asterisk that represents times. Then I'm going to click here to get the other reference for my commission. And then I simply hit enter to finish out this simple function. And I get what I expect, and that's 944.40 times 10% is 94.44. So this is my total. If I was to copy this down, because it's a relative reference, it'll copy the formula successfully down. So let's watch that here. I use my quick fill handle. I grab and I pull that down. And when I release, I see that I accurately have a new formula all the way down. This is a relative reference. If I double click, we can see that it no longer is talking about the 2 row, it's talking about the number 4 row, B4 times C4 over here. I'm going to click here and double click here, and I can see that this is about row 10, B10 times C10. So that's a relative reference, and Excel is very intelligent and figures that out for us. But sometimes we get into a situation where we do not want a relative reference. We want an absolute reference. And let me give you an example of that here. Here we have our base salary, and we've decided that we want to give everyone a $200 bonus. So I'm going to take this salary and give everyone a $200 bonus. So to do that, it's pretty straightforward. Again, I simply click where I want my formula right here. I say equals my base salary here in E2 plus, and over here I have my bonus. So I have my bonus amount of 200, and I click here, it's K5, and I say enter, and sure enough I add $200. Well, what happens if I try to copy this formula all the way down the column? Let me pull it down just 1 to see what happens. Do you see where over here Calvin's quite happy, he got the $200, but here Dean did not get the $200. He's looking at the same amount. This is formatted slightly different. I don't see a dollar sign here, but we can fix that. But it's the same amount. Well, if I click to edit the formula, we'll see what happens. Because it's a relative reference, it successfully copied down to the next row to get this information, to bring it over here, but it also copied down 1 row to get this information here, and because there's nothing in K6, I got this number plus 0, so the number stayed the same. So you can see how lockstep this would come all the way down. So let's copy the formula down even further, and if I click down here, you see now it's coming all the way down here to get the bonus amount. That's because it's a relative reference. Just like it came down here about 10 rows, it came down here about 10 rows. So what we want to tell Excel is to stay here on this reference all the time. So let's delete all this. I'm just going to click and drag all the way up and hit delete on my keyboard. Now let's click in this formula again. I'm going to double click so we can see the formula. So E2, it's okay for it to be relative. We want it to go down each time we copy down. We want it to pick up the new base salary each time we copy this formula down. But we want K5 to stay the same. Another way of saying that is we want K5 to be an absolute reference, a reference that does not change, a reference that does not keep coming down. To do that, we simply put a $sign in front of each one of those. $sign is above the 4. Click here, put in a $sign, and here put in a $sign. And now that works. So we copy this down, and everybody gets the new $200 bonus. So these are accurate numbers. We can double click one of them, and we see that it successfully picked up this salary, but over here K5 remained the same and they still got the $200. So this concept is very important. It's dealing with absolute references. Now I want to show you a little shortcut we can do. I'm going to delete all of these and come up here. Now we created this formula here. I'm going to highlight this and just come over here and grab this reference again just to get a regular K5. Now it can be quite difficult to use the $sign by shift and above the 4 and then shift above the 4 to get the $sign. So Excel has built into it a wonderful shortcut. You just simply have to be clicked inside of this address. See, I'm between the K and the 5, so I have selected the address. I'm in the address. I can also highlight the whole address like that. But you simply hit F4 on your keyboard, F4, and it will automatically put in the $signs. Now, sometimes people have asked, why do you need a $sign in front of the K and in front of the 5? Seems like it'd be easier just to have one $sign. Well, it's because we're actually telling Excel that we want K column to never move, and we also want the 5 row to never move. Well, actually, we only would need to have the $sign in front of the 5 because we want to make sure 5 row doesn't move, because the relative change in our formula is not going to change the column. It's not going to move left and right. So technically, you would only need the $sign in front of the 5. But because it's so easy to just hit F4 to get what we want, that's okay. I want to show you one other shortcut, and that is for using our autofill. Up till now, we've always grabbed the autofill handle where we get the thin plus right here, and we grab it and drag it down. But Excel is pretty smart. If you double click on the autofill handle, I'm going to go right over the autofill handle and double click. It will automatically fill our formula all the way down to the bottom of where it sees some data. And it's looking over here and seeing some data. And even though this column is empty, it's looking over here and it's stopping right here. Now this double clicking is very useful. It works with every other type of autofill. In a previous lesson we talked about copying and autofilling dates and numbers and quarters and days of the month and days of the week. One other example right here, and that's to give them a 2.4% raise. So this should make sense to you now. To calculate what the total raise would be, we take the base salary and we times it by 2.4% and we get the answer here. So right here is where I want the answer, so that's where I put the formula, equals, and our base salary, which is E2, times our raise, 2.4%. So I click here to get K4 and then hit enter to accept. And then there's the total raise that they'll receive based on that percentage. And I'm going to double click on my autofill to fill that all the way down. Now, did you see what happened? I did not make a relative reference. So let's try again. Double click, open that up. I'm going to put my cursor between K and 4 to make sure that address is being identified by Excel. And I'm just going to hit F4 on my keyboard. There's my relative reference. Now I'm going to come over here Now I'm going to come over here to the autofill handle and I'm going to double click it, and it will cover up the previous mistake. Double click, and there's all my new numbers. So very good. Now what would happen if I changed one of these numbers? Let's say we've decided we're going to be even more generous. We had a very good year, and it's going to be a 2.6% raise. I just changed that number, I hit enter to accept, and all of my raise numbers changed. How about over here on our bonus? We've decided we actually can't afford 200. It's going to be 199 bonus for everyone. Maybe it's a Christmas bonus. And I hit enter, and all of my numbers change accordingly over here. So this can be extremely useful to use a relative and an absolute reference. And these two here, raise and bonus, were absolute references.